After remarrying Evan, I became the perfect wife who no longer checked his whereabouts or his phone. At the class reunion, when asked what his biggest regret was, Evan subconsciously looked toward Clara. Someone, having drunk too much and speaking without restraint, that goes without saying, Evan's biggest regret must be not marrying the school beauty twice. He even divorced for her back then, but couldn't resist someone clinging like a plaster and insisting on remarrying. The atmosphere instantly became awkward. Evan, fearing I would throw a public tantrum like before, was about to explain. But I said nothing and smiled to smooth things over for him. It's fine, everyone has regrets. I have one too. My regret is that during the last divorce, in a fit of anger, I impulsively took nothing. In the newly drafted divorce agreement, the one leaving with nothing cannot be me. Lydia, what's your regret? While waiting for the designated driver, Evan leaned against the car and asked abruptly. I lowered my head, swiping the phone screen without lifting my gaze. Forgot. Forgot? He clearly didn't believe it. I didn't respond to his probing, and the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. After a long while, he rubbed his forehead. I always feel that your attitude toward me has been strange since we remarried. You're too sensitive. Hearing the same words come from my mouth, Evan was momentarily speechless, then anger flared up from somewhere. Before remarrying, I assured you repeatedly that I would never let Clara interfere in our lives again and promised to keep my distance from her. Even at today's class reunion, she and I went our separate ways. What more do you want from me? His patience was never abundant, so speaking this much was rare for him. I've said it so many times, if it weren't for Clara's father sponsoring me back then, I could never have left that small fishing village. I turned off the phone screen, stared at him steadily, and calmly responded to his impatience. You don't need to explain, I know. I had heard the same words countless times. That's why I could endure, after graduation, Evan going to great lengths to exceptionally recruit Clara into the hospital and keep her by his side. That's why I could endure her frequent appearances in our lives, even on our wedding anniversary, where there would be a third chair. That's why I could endure them sharing every detail of their daily lives, while his responses to me were always cold and curt. But until that time when I returned early from a business trip and saw them entangled naked together, I couldn't endure it anymore. I proposed divorce, preferring to leave with nothing just to cut ties with him sooner. Unexpectedly, soon after, my mother was diagnosed with a malignant tumor and needed surgery. Coincidentally, this surgery could only be performed by Evan. So, I went to beg him. What chilled me more than an emotional backlash was his attitude. Lydia, you know I've been very busy since becoming director. But if the patient is my mother-in-law, I'll definitely make time to perform it myself. So, do you admit your mistake? I looked at him in shock, and under his smug expression, I nodded. We remarried. But a broken mirror ultimately cannot be mended. Even sleeping in the same bed, we were like strangers. Just like today. Evan. You really haven't left yet. I knew you wouldn't abandon Clara alone. Clara's college roommate waved from afar. Supporting Clara, she walked up to us in a few steps. Clara is so beautiful, I don't feel safe letting her go back alone. Didn't you always send her home before? She glanced at me intentionally or not, with a mocking tone. Lydia, you look so safe, going home alone shouldn't be a problem, right? Evan looked at Clara, half drunk and leaning in her roommate's arms, then at me beside him, showing a troubled expression. It turned out that no matter how many times, his hesitation still burned my heart with pain. But unlike the previous loud arguments, this time I just expressionlessly raised my phone. My ride has arrived, I'm leaving first. Coincidentally, the designated driver arrived too. Evan helped Lydia into the back seat, rolled down the window, and looked up at me. Then you go home first and wait for me. Tomorrow I'll perform the last surgery for your mother, tonight we'll discuss the details. Without any surprise, Evan didn't return all night. But fortunately, I no longer foolishly waited for him like before. If breakup is a massive withdrawal reaction, then I've been tormented by this emotion twice. The first time, I collapsed and deleted his number, throwing away everything related to him. But after years of love, everything about him had already become an inseparable part of my life. The books he gave me still had his love letters tucked inside, every word expressing deep affection. He personally knitted a scarf for an entire month, poking his fingers until they bled, yet he smiled foolishly and urged me to try it on to see if it fit. Knowing I liked stargazing, he used 2 months' part-time wages to buy a telescope and confessed to me under a once-in-a-century meteor shower. "Lydia, I'm an orphan with no one to care for me since childhood. I hope in the future to be possessed and controlled by you." But later, he said, "In this world, I treat Clara as my only family. Lydia, can you not be so possessive?" Family? What kind of family sleeps naked in the same bed? Actually, from the beginning, I had heard rumors about him and Clara in school. They all said Evan was that year's top scorer in the college entrance exam, and the school exceptionally admitted Clara for his sake. They came from the same small fishing village, with a childhood sweetheart bond that I couldn't help but suspect. But he said, it was Victor who adopted me back then, otherwise, I would have died long ago. I must repay this kindness. But Lydia, rest assured, in my heart, she's forever just a sister. I believed him, yet I lost 5 years of my life. Honestly, during that meeting after the divorce, my heart still pounded fiercely because of him. His phone lock screen was still our photo together, as if nothing had changed. Remarrying him was like giving myself a second withdrawal. I couldn't forgive him and pretend nothing happened. Nor could I immediately turn away decisively and cut ties swiftly. So, I'd use a dull knife to grind slowly. Even if it hurt more and took longer. But fortunately, after half a year, I finally became numb. Once Mom's last surgery is done, I can divorce him again without any burden. I've already drafted the divorce agreement. I get 70% of the assets, he 30%. After all, he's the one who did wrong, he must pay some price, right? However, the next day, Evan disappeared. The doctor temporarily pushed onto the operating table was sweating profusely. "We can't contact Dr. Evan. As his wife, don't you know where he went? I only have less than a 10% chance with this surgery. You need to prepare yourself mentally." Evan's phone was unreachable the whole time. I called no less than 100 times, until I was numb, mechanically dialing the same number over and over. Until who knows how many times, it was suddenly answered. "Evan, where exactly?" "It's Lydia. Evan temporarily accompanied me back to my hometown and is showering now." With a buzz, my mind went blank. The phone smashed to the ground, the screen shattering into pieces. I don't know if it was an illusion, but I seemed to hear Evan's voice from the receiver. "Who called? Is it Lydia?" "No, just a spam call." For the next 3 hours, I knelt outside the operating room, begging death not to take my mother's life over and over. But when the operating room lights went out, what awaited was a death notice. I handled my mother's funeral alone. For a full 7 days, I was in a dazed state. Until the 8th day, Evan finally returned. "I'm sorry, Before he could finish, I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. "Evan, you bastard. You killed my mother." I used all my strength in that slap, turning Evan's face to the side. To my surprise, he wasn't angry. He just patiently explained, "Your mother's condition wasn't optimistic. Even if the surgery succeeded, she would be tormented by repeated chemotherapy afterward. Clara's father suddenly became critically ill. If I didn't accompany her back, she might not even see her father's last moments." I was so angry my whole body trembled, unable to utter a complete sentence. Unexpectedly, his stabbing words didn't stop there. "You grew up without a father, so it's normal that you can't understand this kind of emotion." I looked at him in disbelief, unable to connect the face before me with the former lover in my memory. He clearly knew that my father died in his mistress's bed when I was 8, which was a lifelong pain for me. Back then, he had held me protectively with heartache, swearing to be good to me for life. At this moment, I completely lost it. I hurled everything nearby at him, screaming for him to die. But he just watched me rage coldly, and before leaving, said, "Lydia, I'm still used to you like this. Stop pretending in the future, it's meaningless." After he left, I collapsed on the messy floor, wailing. I began to hate him, hating how he impassively used the sharp blade I had handed him to stab me deeply. The phone suddenly rang. It was Clara. "Sister, I heard your mom died. My condolences. It's all Evan's fault. I told him my dad just had a minor cold, but he insisted on abandoning you and your mother to accompany me home." "But, who made you cling to him and insist on remarrying? If anyone is to blame, it's yourself." I was provoked by these messages into losing all reason. Gripping the phone, I rushed into the hospital and reported Evan and Clara's improper relationship to the administration. I reported that Evan, due to selfish desires, caused a major medical accident that killed my mother. But the administration didn't immediately investigate, they just invited me to the office. They said it was a private matter and inconvenient for them to intervene. Between the lines, they warned me that Evan was a medical expert they had hired at great expense, advising me to give up. When Evan arrived, I was arguing with the dean. Why does it have nothing to do with him? If not for him, my mother wouldn't have died. But Evan only said one sentence: "Sorry, my wife has been overly traumatized recently, her mental state might be abnormal." Those originally sympathetic gazes instantly became complicated. They subconsciously stepped back a few paces, distancing themselves from me. Soon, only Evan and I remained in the small office. "Lydia, apologize. I had cried too many times, my eyes were swollen and couldn't see his face clearly, but I could feel his condescending aura. You shouldn't have caused a scene in the hospital. If it spreads, it would harm Clara's reputation. So, I want you to apologize to her." I no longer wasted words with him and turned to open the door. I was going to contact the media, reporters, to expose their shady relationship. But I heard him sigh softly behind me. "Lydia, then don't blame me." As the youngest director physician in the hospital, a renowned young genius in the medical field, it took him 7 years to climb to this position, but only 7 days to commit me to a psychiatric hospital. I lost count of how many times I said I wasn't ill, but it only resulted in higher doses of sedatives and tighter restraints. I began to calm down, no longer resisting, biding my time. Finally, I seized the opportunity and escaped. Penniless and still in the psychiatric hospital gown, passers-by avoided me like the plague. With difficulty, I found a kind girl in a nearby mall and borrowed her phone. But I hesitated when making the call. Who to call? The police? Given the situation, they would likely contact Evan as my sole guardian, leading only to another round of confinement for me. In despair, I suddenly remembered my university mentor. He was my mother's old friend and the officiant at Evan and my wedding. In this world, no one else could help me but him. Upon hearing my voice, the mentor was silent for a moment, then a worried voice came through the receiver. "Lydia, don't move, send me the address, I'll come find you right away." My heart, suspended for many days in the psychiatric hospital, finally found a lifeline. The cost of sudden relaxation after high tension was severe abdominal pain. I could only grit my teeth and find the nearest restroom. 10 minutes later, when I came out, I unexpectedly saw the mentor at the location I told him, with his back to me, on the phone. Vaguely, I heard the word Evan. I subconsciously hid in the corner. But the mentor's next words made my blood freeze instantly. I told her to wait in place. I don't know where she ran off to. "Evan, rest assured, the psychiatric hospital I've contacted won't affect you and Clara's commendation ceremony today. As for that academic journal we mentioned before." I covered my mouth tightly, but sobs escaped through my fingers. Evan had long calculated who I would contact after escaping, like an experienced hunter setting a deadly trap himself, waiting for me to walk into it. At that moment, without hesitation, I turned and ran. Down the stairs, out of the mall, as far as possible. Until temporarily safe, the shake in me suddenly remembered the commendation ceremony the mentor mentioned on the phone. I remembered Evan had told me before that he was the award presenter for this commendation. I bet Evan wasn't home at the moment. So, I sneaked back home, turned on the computer, and pulled out all the secretly saved chat records and videos about Evan and Clara's extramarital affair from this period. and copied all the shady methods Evan used back then to pave the way for Clara. Then I took a taxi to the hospital, stole a set of cleaner's clothes when no one was looking, and changed into them. After confirming I wouldn't be recognized, I sneaked into the commendation ceremony site. At that time, Clara was on stage as the most beautiful doctor, delivering her acceptance speech. With a smile on her lips, her white coat fitting perfectly, she was composed and elegant. As a doctor, more important than external beauty is the purity of the heart, only then can one live up to this white coat. The audience erupted in thunderous applause, with countless spotlights flashing wildly. The host took over with a beaming smile. "Thank you, Dr. Clara, for your wonderful sharing. Next, please welcome Director Liu to present the award for our annual Most Beautiful Doctor." Evan stepped onto the stage, his gaze gently falling on Clara, and spoke. "Dr. Clara is indeed the most benevolent doctor I've encountered. Over years of practice, she has selflessly protected the completeness of countless families with great love. She truly deserves this honor." Applause surged like a tide, even more intense than before. Immediately after, Evan handed the trophy to Clara, who smiled and reached out to receive it. Just as their fingers were about to touch under everyone's gaze, I suddenly stood up and shouted with all my might, "Wait." The host was stunned. "This lady, who are you?" Under everyone's gaze, I slowly removed my mask. Evan's smile froze instantly. I slowly walked onto the stage. With each step closer to Evan, his expression grew darker. He gave the host a look, and the host immediately understood and said, "This lady, today is our internal medical community commendation ceremony. Unrelated persons please leave." The security at the door quickly stepped forward. I smiled bitterly, looking into Evan's eyes, and said word by word, "Evan, Dr. Evan. Are you so guilty that you don't even dare to see me?" Evan cleared his throat and calmly said, "This, patient's family member, whatever it is, discuss it off stage. This isn't a place for your nonsense." Evan was indeed clever. In one sentence, he defined my onstage action as medical disturbance. Most seated below were doctors, who deeply abhorred such behavior and shouted for security to hurry and remove me from the stage. I had anticipated he would say that, so I pulled out the marriage certificate from my pocket and held it high above my head. At the same time, I snatched the host's microphone and loudly declared, "I am Evan's legal wife, Lydia. I report in real name that during Evan's tenure, he and Clara beside him have an immoral and sordid relationship. Moreover, due to selfish desires, Evan disappeared right before the surgery, causing my mother to die on the operating table." The information was too dense, causing instant silence below the stage. The hospital leadership suddenly stood up, about to shout angrily, but saw countless reporters' cameras aimed at him. He then realized there was a full live broadcast today. If he tried to handle me muddily to protect Evan like before, it would likely bring irreversible consequences to himself and the hospital. He switched to a hypocritical smile. "Oh, it's Evan's wife. Whatever it is, you two should discuss it behind closed doors, not cause a scene in such a big occasion." He exchanged a glance with Evan, who frowned and tried to grab my arm, but I hastily dodged. I had long known Evan and the administration were birds of a feather, and the only ones who could help me on site were those completely unaware, like the reporters. "Dear reporters, esteemed experts in the medical field, I ask, does a person unworthy of their position deserve to stand on stage presenting awards? Does a woman who repeatedly destroys others' families deserve the honor of Most Beautiful Doctor?" Every word of mine was resounding, silencing the audience below for a moment. Finally, someone asked, "Lady, do you have evidence for what you said?" "Of course." I raised the USB drive in my hand and handed it to a staff member. Seeing this, Evan gritted his teeth, stepped forward, and sternly shouted, "Lydia, how long will you keep making a fuss?" He turned to the crowd with a weary apologetic expression. "I'm sorry everyone, my wife has." However, just as he opened his mouth, I quickly interrupted him. "The innocent have nothing to fear, Dr. Evan. If you're not wrong, there's no need to feel guilty. Today's live broadcast has over 100,000 viewers. If because of your evasion, the outside world questions the entire medical community, can you bear that responsibility?" Evan froze in place, the unsaid words stuck in his throat. Below the stage, several highly influential medical authorities nodded in agreement. I, Lydia, swear here, if what I said is false and affects Mr. Evan and Ms. Clara, I am willing to bear legal responsibility. But I just want justice. Soon, the staff had projected the evidence I provided onto the big screen. Screenshots scrolled by, all of Clara's indecent flirtatious words to Evan. Groups of photos and videos played, intimate shots of the two traveling freely under the guise of business trips. Pieces of evidence showed Evan forging her school records and spending heavily to pave her way into the hospital. All this evidence was quietly collected by me over the half-year since remarrying him. As I said, leaving with nothing in the last divorce was my biggest regret. The screen froze on a chat screenshot, the provocative message Clara sent me after learning of my mother's death. My dad just had a minor cold, but he insisted on abandoning you mother and daughter to accompany me home. The large words were clearly displayed on the screen, eliciting sighs from below. Clara nervously gripped Evan's arm, her face showing uncontrollable panic. Evan gave her a reassuring look. When looking at me, a trace of complexity flashed in his eyes. He quickly spoke, "Sorry, my wife suffers from severe mental illness and delusions. All this evidence is forged based on her fantasies. As her guardian, I will commit her to a psychiatric hospital for life. Please forgive her nonsense." The crowd murmured, "So she's a lunatic, can her words be taken seriously? Dr. Evan is really pitiful, successful in career but married to a crazy wife." They all agreed to let Evan take me away for further psychiatric treatment. Evan gave me a cold glance, as if mocking my overestimation. However, at that moment, an elderly gentleman over 60 in the first row suddenly spoke, "Wait." Based on her speech logic and behavioral expression, I believe she is unlikely to be ill. The nameplate in front of the old man read Chief Expert in Forensic Psychiatric Appraisal. Once he spoke, everyone present nodded in agreement. I cast him a grateful look. Taking a deep breath, I spoke hoarsely, "Everyone may not know, but I did escape from a psychiatric hospital. And the one who personally sent me to the hospital was my husband, Evan. He forged my psychiatric evaluation report, bribed the hospital staff, and confined me for a full half-month. All this just because I previously wanted an explanation from him. Having been confined in the psychiatric hospital too long, I was clearly exhausted, but I still forced myself to continue. I know you all are prominent figures in the medical field. I believe you won't allow such a tumor to exist." Facing the camera, my voice grew more choked. "I believe many people are watching this live broadcast. I hope you can understand my pain as a daughter, watching my mother lose her life because of my husband and a third party. I also hope you can understand the despair of being sent to a psychiatric hospital by the person I loved for years." Sobs arose from below the stage. Some empathetic reporters had red eyes, loudly saying they must report this to give me justice. More and more people directed hateful gazes at Evan and Clara, clamoring to investigate thoroughly and for the hospital to expel this hypocritical pair. While waiting for investigators, Evan stood dejectedly aside. Clara staggered back half a step, eyes full of panic. "Evan, what do we do? You promised my dad to take care of me, you can't abandon me." Evan irritably waved off her hand. "What to do? How would I know? If you hadn't lied about your father being critically ill, would I have abandoned everything to go back with you, causing her mother's death?" Clara looked at the man before her in disbelief. In all these years, this was the first time he spoke harshly to her. With a ferocious expression, she pointed at Evan's face and roared, "I don't care, your life was saved by the Zhou family. Without my dad, you'd have died in the pigsty long ago. You must repay this kindness for life." Watching the former childhood sweethearts now biting each other for their own interests, I turned my face away, but no faint pleasure flashed in my heart. This incident soon exploded into intense discussions online. Under the supervision of numerous media and netizens, I underwent a formal psychiatric evaluation. The results showed I had no so-called mental illness or delusions, only moderate depression. This made netizens even more outraged. Some even dug up Clara's misdeeds during university, saying she often had Evan add her name to others' academic journals, and she frequently failed courses, originally unqualified to graduate. And Evan's improper methods to pave her way privately were confirmed. In the face of ironclad evidence, the administration could no longer protect Evan as before. A month later, both Clara and Evan were dismissed. They were blacklisted in the industry, barred for life from employment in any formal hospital. As for me, I hired the most renowned divorce lawyer in the field to handle this divorce lawsuit. Unexpectedly, at this stage, Evan refused to sign the divorce agreement. Is he dissatisfied with the asset division? The lawyer shook her head. He said even leaving with nothing is fine, but before that, he wants to see you once. Meeting Evan again was in a familiar coffee shop, the one where he worked part-time when I first met him. He seemed to have arrived earlier. Upon seeing me enter, he stood up from his chair at once. "Lydia, I knew you would see me." He looked much thinner than a month ago. His usually neatly groomed chin now had dense stubble. "What's the matter?" I got straight to the point. Evan was stunned, his fingers uneasily clutching his hem, awkward like the day I first met him when he accidentally spilled coffee on my laptop. Over these years, fame and status had gradually eroded his heart, allowing him to achieve far beyond his peers, but also making him arrogant, unfamiliar, and detestable. I still remember our first meeting. It was my first day at work, and I accidentally damaged your computer. I was very panicked then, with only 500 yuan on me, but you smiled and said no need to compensate. I coldly interrupted his reminiscence and pushed the divorce agreement in front of him. "Evan, I'm not here to reminisce with you." Sadness flashed across his face. I know, Lydia. I just want to ask, is there really no possibility between us? These days, I've gone through a lot. Compared to losing those vain titles and status, what I can't accept more is losing you. I know I was wrong. Clara's family has kindness toward me, so I hurt you repeatedly for her, even when she actively threw herself at me saying she liked me. I didn't push her away. Evan grew more emotional as he spoke, his eyes reddening. But my heart was completely calm, unlike our meeting after the last divorce. Back then, I still felt moved by him. Honestly, at that time, more than resentment and hate, it was grievance. And grievance means still having feelings for that person. However, now, besides feeling annoyed, I have no emotional fluctuations. I think I've finally endured this withdrawal process lasting over half a year. Just as he wanted to say more, a resentful female voice suddenly came from behind. "Evan, I knew you came to see her." Clara slowly walked over. She wasn't wearing makeup but was still beautiful, even with a fresh, natural charm. What surprised me was her slightly protruding abdomen. "What are you doing here?" Evan was clearly surprised, his gaze toward me tinged with panic. Clara saw the divorce agreement on the table and gently held Evan's hand. "I already have your child in my belly, Evan. Are you going to abandon us, mother and child?" Evan weakly opened his mouth but ultimately said nothing. "We came out of the small fishing village together, we are from the same world. Even if you have nothing now, over these years I've saved quite a bit, enough for a comfortable life." She glanced at me, eyes faintly jealous. "As for Lydia, for these born with a silver spoon misses, do you expect her to have any true feelings for you?" "Evan, believe me, I'm the only one who truly loves you." Evan's facial emotions became complex, regret, entanglement, and a resigned sigh. Ultimately, he picked up the divorce agreement and signed his name on it. Another month passed. My divorce case with Evan soon had a judgment. As the at-fault party in the marriage, I received most of the assets. I left the house we shared to him. Not out of pity, but because I knew not to drive him to desperation. For someone like Evan, if truly cornered, he might do something irreversible. With the post-marriage divided assets and my mother's inheritance, I had enough for a worry-free life. I took out some money to open a flower shop, enjoying the moments of watching flowers bloom by my own hands. But I also knew Evan often secretly watched me from across the street. Most of the time, I chose to ignore it. After all, he was now just an insignificant passerby to me. That day, near closing, the last customer came. I was just lowering my head to trim flower stems. There aren't many fresh flowers left today. If not urgent, you can come tomorrow. Give me a bunch of camellias. Hearing the long-absent voice, I slowly raised my head. Sold out. Evan stood at the door, eyes full of complexity. We're about to close, if this gentleman has no other business. I just want to see with my own eyes if you're doing well. Fearing I'd drive him out, he quickly explained. Rest assured, I won't entangle you, just. I miss you too much. I pursed my lips, pondering how to get rid of this trouble. But then the door was pushed open again. Ah, you Evan, I wondered what you've been out doing these days. Turns out you came to find this bitch. Clara, with her pregnant belly, was full of shrewishness in her gestures, hard to associate with the former campus goddess who occupied school social accounts for her purity. Clara cursed harshly, even using profanities at Evan. She habitually pinched his ear, with a ferocious expression, and grabbed a nearby bunch of flowers, smashing it into Evan's face. The untrimmed stem scratched across his face, drawing a stark blood mark. It seemed their life wasn't harmonious or happy. I had heard before that after their marriage, Evan refused to go out and find work. Their previous money was squandered soon, and later Clara worked as a nanny to support them both. After venting at Evan, Clara turned her spearhead to me. And you damned bitch, seducing someone else's husband, watch me beat you to death, you homewrecker. She raised her palm to rush at me but was grabbed by the arm by Evan. He pleaded, stop making a fuss, I was wrong, let's go home, okay? Clara, still not satisfied, cursed and tried to push Evan away. I pointed to the camera overhead and said coldly, if you don't leave, I'll call the police. That bunch you smashed is Ecuadorian, just imported from abroad, 4 figures. Clara's face stiffened, gritting her teeth, robbery, you. Then she dragged Evan out of the flower shop. Even dozens of meters away, her cursing could still be heard. From that day, I didn't see Evan for a long time, so long that I even suspected he had moved out of the city. That morning, I opened for business. Suddenly, near the shop door, I heard several aunties chatting gossip after morning exercise. Hey, did you hear? Last night in Songsham community, there was a murder. Heard the man caught them in adultery and personally killed the woman and her lover. How could I not know? Heard the woman was pregnant and still messing around. I subconsciously stopped. Songsham community was the house I left to Evan after divorce. The aunties got more animated. Yes. The man was some doctor before, then something happened and he was fired. I also heard they weren't original spouses, it was a mistress rising, serves them right, I say. Through their back and forth, I gradually pieced together the full story. After Evan and Clara married, initially their days were relatively peaceful and happy. But gradually, Clara became dissatisfied with the current life. She started resenting Evan staying home every day without looking for work. Seeing the decadent Evan at home only drinking and smoking would irritate her, despising him as useless. The previous Evan was like a favored son of heaven to her. She had indeed loved him once, but unfortunately, when he fell from grace overnight, those youthful filters shattered completely. During her time as a nanny for a wealthy family, she hooked up with the male host. For thrill, she even called her lover home when Evan was out. As Evan pushed the door open, he saw Clara naked and embracing a strange man in an indecent scene. No man can accept being cuckolded. Especially Evan, who was in extreme emotional low, scolded daily by Clara. So, he grabbed the kitchen boning knife and swung it at his former childhood sweetheart. What about the man? Hearing my sudden question, the aunties turned to look. The man called the police after killing and committed suicide. By the time police arrived, he had already jumped from the rooftop. Boss lady, do you know them? I smiled and shook my head, no, just curious. Turning back to the flower shop, the morning news was broadcasting this extremely vile murder case. Seeing the familiar names, I sighed and turned off the TV. A gust of wind blew, gently ringing the wind chimes at the door. Like a clear sigh, soothing all the ripples from last night.